In the Gun, episode 15 of your new favorite WVU football podcast. It's time for a Texas recap. If everything is bigger in Texas, maybe this recap will be along those same lines. Wes Uhler with you here with the best teammates in the business, the runaway beer truck, Owen Schmitt, and the signal caller, Jed Drenning. Big O, after you fighting through it, playing through injury last week, I mean, you're back. Microphone sounds great. New headphones. How we feeling?
Saucy. A lot better than this weekend after that loss. That was I
tell you what, poor Jedgar Allan Poe. I mean, rough loss down there in Texas, issues with his press pass, issues with his microphone on the sideline, issues getting home when he landed at 4:30 in the morning. That's a tough 24 hours or so there. Jed, was the Salt Lick barbecue at least fantastic as always?
That was the only high point, really, of the entire weekend. The Salt Lick, of course, the Salt Lick always delivers. You know, as Tony likes to say, they're like that consistent golfer who always drives it straight down the fairway. It's always going to be true. You know, we ordered family style. There were 8 of us. Coach Wallace and I had enough sense. We walked. The last time, you got to think back, 2020, because of COVID, we had to order from the hotel, so it wasn't the same experience. We were kind of trapped in the hotel in Austin. So we had to go back to 2018, the last time we were physically on site, brick and mortar for, Salt Lick there in Round Rock. And that night, Coach Wallace and I were just stupid. I mean, we walked out hurting. Okay. We both took a vow. We both took a vow. Okay. We're not going to get that excessive tonight. We're going to be smarter than that. Let everybody around us be stupid. So I was sitting next to Mike Montoro, football SID. He's across from Tony, and those guys had a battle. I mean, I'm sitting next to Montoro. When I'm sitting next to Montoro, I think I got bruised from eating next to him. I mean, he was just throwing it out, but he and Tony were going at it now. But I think by a couple ribs, Montoro was declared winner. But you can't go wrong.
Wow.
It was terrific as always. But the only high point to an otherwise weekend.
Yeah, we're going to break it all down here on this episode of ITG. This episode is brought to you in part by our new friends at Bet Online. How about that, fellas? New sponsor here on the show. I tell you what, we're going big time. Big shout out.
National.
And welcome to the party to Bet Online. This episode brought to you by the good folks at Bet Online. Before we get into some specifics, gentlemen, some headlines here as always. New top 25. Kansas is ranked, and Georgia taking a couple steps back after some rocky back-to-back performances by the defending national champions.
Oh, no, I'm a little surprised Georgia didn't slide a little more. You know what I mean? Missouri a week ago, very much, that's why you play the games. I mean, you would have guessed that Missouri would have been a football team that was down and out after what happened to them a week ago, but they regrouped, they circled the wagon. More credit to the Tigers for playing the way they did. But Georgia was lucky to get out of there with a win, and they only slid to number 2. But as you touched on, hats off to Kansas, ranked in both polls in the top 20 for the first time since 2009. And speaking of the top 20, unbeaten TCU climbs to 17. We'll get into it, how they throttle Oklahoma later on. And in the coaches poll, they're in the top 20 as well. Kansas State. So Kansas to Mayflower State has 2 teams in the top 20, right behind the Jayhawks or the Wildcats, but Syracuse back in the top 20. Baylor stayed in the coaches poll, I think, as they should. In my estimation, maybe the most complete team in the Big 12, but they dropped out of the AP. Some shaking and baking going on there. Some interesting things playing out. Clemson survived, stayed in the top 5 against the Fighting Gibbies. But, some interesting shaking and baking there in the top 25.
Yeah, LSU in for the first time in the Brian Kelly era there. Syracuse back in. UCLA in the top 20. I was impressed. That was a nice win they had over Washington. I thought they were a little fool's gold to start the season. But, hey, when you take care of business like that against Washington, I think that's a legit team.
I mean, think about that. They'd played 4 games, and their biggest game had been South Alabama.
That's what
Imagine
I mean.
playing a schedule like that. Of course you're 4-0, right?
Yeah.
And
so, I wasn't so sure they'd take care of business against the Huskies, Wes. You're right, and they did.
They did, and they looked impressive doing so. And there's a couple of those teams that are in the poll here that haven't played, a gauntlet schedule yet, but that's what you get early on in the season, and certainly something we'll keep an eye on going forward.
Yeah.
Another headline, a crazy one here, Jed, that you shared with us right before the show started. According to reports, multiple SMU players plan to sit out the rest of the regular season with the intention to preserve their redshirt year and enter the transfer portal after this season, SMU staff members with knowledge of the situation have said. We've discussed some of these ever-changing landscape of college football type stories before. This is certainly a crazy one. I mean, I don't know if it's quite Herm Edwards' staff leaking information to their opponents, but when you want to talk business decisions, right? That's a term that gets used in football a lot. Business, that was a business decision. Man, it's all over the board here.
Yeah, and of course, player liberty, player movement, however you want to phrase it. That's where this is all heading. But there are some troubling trends. I truly believe that right now we're experiencing a moment in time that will be reflected on in a lot of 30/30s and documentaries for the rest of our lives. This short span of time before they can wrap their hands around all these changes that are happening at once, that really, are the game's undergoing, seismic shifting because of all these changes. And this is a trend that it kind of sort of started back in 19 with Derek King. Of course, the irony, when Derek King transferred from Houston to Miami, he transferred to Rhett Lashley, who was on staff at Miami, and Rhett Lashley's now the head coach at SMU, where this is happening. The question is, to what extent, how many players? I don't really know the specifics or particulars of it, but here we are. The new red shirt rule allows for you to play Owen in 4 games, and you can still retain your eligibility and then sit out and transfer. And that's what a lot of these kids appear to be deciding to do. They don't like where their team's sitting. And SMU's been a pretty competitive football team with a couple tight losses to Power 5 teams. I don't know what you do here. I don't see this changing until other things change around it, but just there's a lot of troubling things happening in the game until all this somehow, some way gets synced up. And this is just another one of those things.
Yeah, this is pretty crazy. Very cool advantage for the athlete, obviously. Very cool advantage. How many times can they do that? Once?
Well, it depends if you're a grad transfer. Okay. And again, these rules are constantly in flux, but as I understand it, under ordinary circumstances, you're free to transfer once. Okay. And then after that, that without graduating, without being a grad transfer, and then you have to apply for a waiver. You can still do it a second time without sitting out, but the NCAA would then have to grant you a waiver. But again, these rules are constantly changing. In other words, you can do it once, Owen, and then the second time, again, as I understand it, last I checked, it was recently, like it used to be when you and I played. Okay. You got to sit out anyway the second time unless you get the waiver. But
now, have they changed the rule? Because when I was coming from Division III, I had to sit out that first year because I don't know why they would have done it. I always thought it was supposed to be in reverse. If you were coming from higher up, they'd almost kind of like, quote unquote, punish you for going to a lower level. But if you were going up, but for some reason I had to sit out that first year. I was ineligible no matter what I would have done, even if I would have been able to come in and play.
Same thing happened to me, Owen. You went D3 to Division I. What I did was the first time I transferred, I went back then, it was 1AA. Of course.
Yeah. So you went up.
I went 1AA up to WVU and had to sit out. And then when I transferred from WVU to Sanford, or excuse me, to Glenville, it wasn't because it was Division II at the time. Glenville was NAIA, so different rules applied in the NCAA.
Oh, okay.
When I transferred up, just like you, I had to sit out transferring up to WVU. But then I didn't have to sit out transferring down because it was an NAIA school.
Okay.
But I believe you could transfer down and not sit out.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That was my understanding.
That's how it used to be. And
yeah. Now these rules are crazy. And, on one aspect of it, I'm, as a player, it's like, if something were to happen, a coach maybe leave or something.
Yeah.
I mean, something like that, where you were really excited to play about that guy, and maybe he wants you to come to his new school, maybe, who knows? which that's a whole nother can of
Riley.
worms. You know what I mean?
Riley.
That's a whole nother can of worms.
I think what we've learned here, Wes, is Owen and I were both in the portal before it was cool, right?
Yeah.
That's right. You guys are trendsetters, some might say.
Totally.
And final headline here. You know what? This works well. A story that's going to hit home close to the Big O's heart in his home state of Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Badgers have parted ways with Paul Chryst after 67-26 record. Certainly a lot of surprise here. I think that's fair to say. Paul Chryst has had a lot of success. They just won 9 games last year. They've won 10 or more games 4 times during his tenure there in Wisconsin. Owen, and a pretty cool connection that you have with the new interim head coach of the Badgers as well, too.
Yeah, well, it's kind of it's a football story, right? So it's a long story, but I'll keep it short. But the gist of it is both Wisconsin boys, right? Jim's a Wisconsin boy, born in Ladysmith. We were born in the same hospital, I believe. Ladysmith, Wisconsin. That's a fun fact. There's only one hospital in Ladysmith, so we were definitely born in the same one. But and then he ends up going to Flambeau High School. I was in Gilman. I was a county down, 2 counties down. And I think we're in the same county. I'm not putting a stamp on that like I know that truthfully, but we were not separated that far. Anyways, he's a couple years older than me. He ends up going to try to play for River Falls. John O'Grady was the coach there. Well, and I don't even know if he was going to actually go there. John O'Grady had a conversation with him and said, Jim, you're a tremendous athlete, tremendous player. I think you're a little above the standard here at River Falls. And he ends up going to Wisconsin, right? He's a 3-time All-American there. Just an absolute stud in the weight room. 5'8", can dunk a basketball. That he's got old highlights on YouTube about him doing that stuff. But absolute tremendous player. Ends up going and playing 8-9 years in the league, and now he's back home coaching at his alma mater in the state he was born in. I mean, how freaking cool is that? I mean, I think I'm going to buy some Johnsonville brats tonight, some Miller Lite, and I'm going to celebrate. That is a win.
You need some spotted cow is what you need.
Yeah, absolutely. That would make, and some cheese curds, but I don't have any in the freezer yet by this time. But no, super cool story. Was there defensive backs for a year, then ends up taking the coordinator job. Now he's the guy. I guarantee he is going to be the guy for a while there. And the reason I say that is because I mean, you want to talk about a locker room guy? I mean, excellent locker room guy. Got to spend time with him when he was doing his camps up in Wisconsin. Just a great dude. I can only imagine what his intellect and passion is on the field. He's going to be a great, for right now, that's the best situation they could have had with going to make this move, exiting with Coach Chryst. But unfortunately, that's football today. Everybody wants results. And I wish Jim the best, and I hope he can kick some tail, man. He's got a good group of kids there, and that they're a tough Wisconsin team. They just need to find themselves a little bit. I look out for them in the next couple of years. Plus, I got a stud running back right now, who's an absolute terror on the field. He is very impressive to watch and a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to watching some Wisconsin football. The Badges.
I saw today, Owen, there was a lot of chatter with some of the national writers, and you were commenting about Jimmy, and I'm thinking, did you cross paths? I was trying to rack my brain. I'm like, okay, in the NFL, did you cross paths with him? Because I wasn't aware of this Wisconsin history until we talked. And I'm thinking, well, he's with the Ravens, he's with the Jets. I'm like, I don't know that Owen and he would have crossed paths in the league. So this is making a lot more sense. And of course, when you say Paul Chryst to me, as we talked about, guys, Paul Chryst is always going to be the baby-faced 24-year-old GA coaching up our wideouts on Coach Nealon's staff when I was playing for the Mountaineers back in the early 90s. I mean, he's always going to be that guy. It's strange for me to see him, the aged version of Paul Chryst today, because he's always that baby-faced GA. But it's such a strange dynamic. 67-26, 3 division titles.
Yeah.
He lost to, maybe this is the unforgivable sin or the final straw, however you want to call it. It's just a crazy circumstance. He lost to Brett Bielema, who, of course, was instrumental in help building that Wisconsin brand after Alvarez. So he's now at Illinois, and they got dusted by those guys at home over the weekend. So they're off to a 2-3 start, but he's 67-26. He has 3 division titles. We live in this age. Again, Wisconsin's sitting there on Big Ten money. So, yeah, you might not necessarily have to pay the king's ransom by their standards with this buyout for Paul Chryst, but they have a lot of money. Anybody in the Big Ten, getting a full Big Ten cut for as long as Wisconsin has been, has a lot of money. Okay. So the decision, I have to believe there was more to it than the on-field product. Because as we talked about the record, nothing would have suggested it seemed pretty reactive. Okay. But some have suggested that they recognized Jim Leonhard was an up and comer. Jim Leonhard is a hot commodity. Jim Leonhard right now is in the building on staff as a hot commodity. So we better grab him while, strike while the iron's hot. I don't know. I'm speculating, but we now live in a world where, you have the Don Nehlen of TCU football is Gary Patterson. And they erected a statue out in front of Amon G. Carter Stadium of their Don Nehlen. And then after the statue was erected, they fired him. It's just like,
and now he's out there in burnt orange.
Now, through 4 games, that's worked out. Let's see how it works out over the long haul. But, look what happened at Nebraska. Again, most coaching hires don't work out. The math is always against you that a new hire is going to work out. Okay. Everybody's talking about Lance Leipold. Well, look at the coaching hires that have taken place, not just at Kansas, but elsewhere, looking for the next Lance Leipold. And what are we, 1 for 1,000 now to finally find a Lance Leipold? And people are ignoring the 999 misses to lead to a Lance. There's a reason that Lance Leipold's the biggest story in college football right now, because he's the one that finally worked out despite the odds, against all odds, against the math. But what happened at Nebraska, and I would say it even started with Frank Solich. Before Pelini, okay? So they fired Solich for winning 8 a year, and then they fired Pelini for winning 9 a year, and they've been a shell of the former selves ever since. You're all one miscalculated coaching change away from a program with relative stability spiraling into that abyss, And again, everybody thinks they have the next Lance Leipold because now Kansas does, but there have been 1,000 tries to find the next Lance Leipold, and only a short handful of them work out. So before you get into that mathematical challenge that is looking for a new coach, okay, like, Nebraska now finds itself in once again, before you get into that mathematical challenge, make sure that you're looking at the situation, say, hey, we've exhausted all possibilities. All hope is lost. We're not competitive at all. There's no chance whatsoever. Now it's time to move on and roll the dice and have all the odds stacked against us and try somebody else. And that's what schools sometimes do. And most often it doesn't work out, but once in a while it does. And when it does, it's big news. Just like it has been at Kansas. And Owen talks about, the promise of a Jim Leonhard. I wouldn't have known that. I recognized him as a sharp-minded young coach, but I wouldn't have recognized all these things Owen's talking about without his history. And maybe they plug him in and he fits. Now, what's interesting, guess who was a Wisconsin native?
Lance Leipold. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, dude. We're all Wisconsin boys, son. Bring out the curds, baby.
Right. Guess who's attached to every job in the free world? Lance Leipold. Because he's the one guy in 1,000 tries that worked out.
He's the new Matt Campbell, baby. He's linked to every job in the country.
Kansas is the new Iowa State. They're like, hey, those other 100 hires that everybody tried didn't work out, but Lance Leipold did. So all we got to do is do it again, and then we got the next one out of 100. Be careful. That's all I'm saying is whoever you are, whether you're USC, whether you're Texas, whoever you might be, that's the new reality of it. And if you have the budget, if you have the resources, if you have the finances, you can roll the dice. But, again, Kansas, what's the buyout? 16, 18 million? Or not Kansas, but Wisconsin. I think somewhere
they said something like that. Here's the alarming part to me is that when schools can do this and just pull the trigger like this, whether they've been thinking about it forever, I don't care how long premeditated it is or whatever, if it's just on a whim, whatnot, that's a lot of money. Okay. 16, 20 million. just to buy a coach out, that's just to buy the coach out. Then what are you buying the staff out? Then you're trying to buy another guy for another 20. So you're talking like you're
Plus
looking
his
at
staff as
40,
well,
yeah,
too.
40,
In
50
other
million
words,
dollars for a
you better
turnaround.
be setting on Big Ten money.
Yeah, I mean,
you better, and even then you're going to take a hit.
and that's what I'm
right?
saying. And you're saying Big Ten money, and like it's just like dawning on me, like there's just so much money out there,
Yeah.
right? It's just not,
Yeah.
this place has this much, this place has that much. It's unfortunate that it has to be like that, but I mean, dude, that's the reality of the situation.
Kansas seems like it was paying 5 head coaches at one time after firing all of them before getting one that worked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that guy might be gone in December.
Yeah.
But it's a crazy word. Gary Patterson was the one that the reality of it really set in with me. I'm like, again, be careful of what you're asking. And I say the same to TCU. Maybe long term, Sonny Dykes is the answer. I believe in Sonny Dykes, and he believes in that job. But again, if you hire the right guy, credit to you because you've overcome the odds. The odds are against you that the next guy is going to work out. That's just what history tells us about any coaching position at any Power 5 school, or for that matter, most Group of 5 schools.
And in coaching, it might be a slower game, but there's new players, man. There's new players that come into play. So, you get some fresh new blood with like Jimmy in there. He just, to have a guy who played there, excelled there, went to the pros, excelled there, played there 8-9 years. I mean, that's a great career. And then comes back to the alma mater, probably sees some things that weren't a part of when he was there, or the tradition that he wants to build, or he knows how much that means to him, right? I mean, to be from Wisconsin, to play from Wisconsin is a huge thing. Just like probably is any other state you'd play for. But I know this one just being a little bit personal, because there have been some meetings and stuff like that as far as Jim goes. It's hard for me not to believe, just because that's like, it's almost how you're raised up there. You know what I mean? Like you're a passionate person. There's a lot of passionate people that come from up there. And
one final West Virginia connection, tight ends coach for the Badgers. Guess who? Former Mountaineer linebacker Chris Herring. So one more Mountaineer connection there. That, again, going back to the Paul Chryst days in the early 90s when I knew him, right? But so I think what'll be key for Jim Leonhard is, let's say that he has enough success down the stretch to remove the interim label and become the guy. It'll be critical, obviously, who he puts in place as his OC. Because that's one of the advantages when you look at a guy like that in his late 30s. Obviously, he's on top of all the new trends in the game. He's of that age, around 40 years old, so he's on top of the modern era of football. And they view Paul as, oh, maybe the game's passed him by. What he does has grown stale. Well, a guy like Jim Leonhard, that's not necessarily the case. It was just a short time ago he was still in the league, right?
Yeah.
So he's on top of all the trends on both sides of the football. So what does he do or put in position after the season's over to assemble his own staff? That would kind of be fun to see, who he might, tap on the shoulder and bring back into Madison to run that offense for him. But I don't know that a lot of folks saw this coming unless you're part of the inner workings in Madison. But just be careful. It's not the next, Nebraska, because Nebraska was a pretty stable program before thinking they were better than what they were being afforded with Bo Pelini. And that's typically how things work out, but there's exceptions to that. But here we go.
I will never think any hire is a complete slam dunk anymore after Scott Frost. That was the biggest no-brainer of all time. Guy had 2 great years at UCF, returning to Nebraska, all those resources, all that history, part of the program. I mean, it was like, all right, well, here comes Nebraska. Maybe they're not going to be Alabama or Ohio State, but they'll be viable. And 3 weeks into the season here, he was canned already. It is a crazy business, an unpredictable business for sure. We're going to go to the 50-yard line here with Jed in just a minute. But first, a little love for our new friends at Bet Online. Folks, football is back, and Bet Online remains your #1 source for all your football betting needs this season. You'll find the latest odds, matchup information, player news, game trends, and more. And as your continued source for all sports wagering info, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, live scores, and giveaways all season long. Always the fastest and easiest way to bet your favorite sports and events like baseball, MMA, tennis, boxing, certainly football, and even golf. So head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 100% welcome bonus with your first deposit. And make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE when you sign up to receive your words. That's BLEAV, BELIEVE, at BetOnline, where the game starts. Jedgar, to the 50-yard line we go. What you got for us? We heard about Salt Lick. We heard about the issues with your press pass. We heard about the issues with the airport and all these different things. I mean, give us something good. Good atmosphere down there. Did you see Matthew McConaughey? What you got for us at the 50-yard line?
Well, you never necessarily know what to expect, when you head to Austin, because they can be a fickle people, okay, in terms of their support for the Longhorns. They're always going to come out in pretty extensive numbers. It's just a matter of the level of passion, okay? And I kind of wondered, they were sore after last week's loss in Lubbock, a game they felt they should have won. They're a couple plays away from being a 4-0 football team, which would, of course, include a win over number 1 ranked Alabama. Enough said, right? So I didn't know what to expect. Would this be one of those crowds that was in the 100,000 ballpark? Did they come close to filling DKR? Or would it be one of those crowds, maybe pushing 90, and they sit on their hands? Okay. I was pretty impressed. It was closer to the former. The official crowd was reported at just over 100. No, I'm not sure it reached that, but it was close. I mean, there weren't nearly as many empty seats and scanning that facility for the better part of that evening as I would have anticipated. I've been down there with only 90, 92 only, I say, use that term loosely. But this was probably pushing that figure. I mean, it was a big crowd. They were into it from the outset. They were ready for a football game. They were ready to bounce back from what they viewed as a situation they let slip away against Texas Tech the week before. So it was a passionate crowd that was into it for the lion's share of the night. And of course, it was made difficult by they jumped right out, and the crowd got into it. We never really did anything to diffuse that crowd out of the gate. I mean, we had some of those early opportunities. We'll talk about it later. We didn't make the most of them. And so things went according to Texas script, and the Texas crowd responded in kind. And they were a very electric part of all the proceedings. And then in the second half, with what played out with CJ, that just, I don't know what words to use to describe that. Terrifying, awful, nightmarish. I mean, it felt like on some level at that point we descended into some level of hell. I'm just like, I can't believe what I'm seeing. This poor kid. All I could think about his family back in Florida, his mom back in Florida watching the game. That's all you can think about. When that happens, that's all you can think about. You could have heard a pin drop among those 100,000 Texas fans. There were some Mountaineer fans there, but as that was playing out, the kids were, out past the hash. I was behind them. I obviously wanted to give them as wide a berth as necessary, but just a very sobering handful of moments there. And I will say this too. This is kind of what I left with. The 3 largest cheers I heard all night from those 100,000 people in this order. Number 3, when they announced the Mississippi State score of beating Texas A&M. Of course, traditional Texas rival, the Aggies, because they hate the Aggies. They love seeing the Aggies lose. So the place roared when they announced that the Pirate had beaten Jimbo. Okay. That's number 3. Number 2, you guys can probably guess. TCU, when the score was announced, they blew the doors off the Sooners. Okay. Place erupted. Okay. But hands down, number 1, as CJ was put on the gurney, as he was wheeled off after what seemed like an eternity of waiting and wanting to know anything. Okay. I don't know if you could see it on the TV broadcast or not. He managed to put a thumb up. There wasn't a roof on it, but the roof would have got blown off at that point had there been. The crowd erupted. And that was kind of a moment of brotherhood in the sport. I thought, hey, tip of the 10-gallon to the Texas fans for that. That was a pretty neat moment. But that, like I said, that knocked everything else that played out the rest of the night, either before it or after it, out of sorts. Because even afterward, you saw kids with tears in their eyes, the Mountaineers trying to regroup, get back in the huddle. You know what I'm saying? When it's you just watch that have your brother. There's such a level of uncertainty, and yeah, it's your job to get back and return focused, but that's your brother, that's your guy, and so very emotional few moments. But like I said, that was a pretty dark stretch of time there that you really wanted to end. And then I remember we got back in the locker room, and that's one of the first things Neil told the team. He got an update from the medical staff who was at the nearby hospital with CJ, and he said, "Hey, he has movement in all extremities. He's going to be returning home." And at that point, you're like, okay, this weight has been lifted. And but as far as being on the sidelines at field level, I'd be remiss if I focused on anything but that, because that just monopolized emotionally and otherwise everything that happened Saturday night.
Yeah, it's always scary when you see when your brother in arms go down like that, and there's no answers. You just kind of sit there, you say a prayer. You know what I mean? You get close, you take a knee, you reflect. A lot of times when stuff like that happens, I reflect how thankful we are to be able to play a game like that, that is so violent, where at any moment it could be taken away from you.
Yeah.
And it brings a reality, to the situation, because sometimes, in all reality, I don't think nobody thinks about that stuff.
No.
You know what I mean?
No,
Nobody does.
You're right.
So when it does happen, it is a little bit of a wake up call, right? Reality check. But you just, you really be thankful that you have your health and you're able to play that great game. And and all you can think about is hoping the speedy recovery for your teammate. So I mean, and I think as Mountaineer fans too, and any fans that are really connected with teams, we all feel that, especially with how he's started out this season. A lot of people are invested. I mean, I was like, oh man, that's our horse.
Yeah. And it's almost
that's like that's our heartbeat right now, man.
That's the brotherhood at large, Owen. And
Yeah.
you're right. It's like we lose sight of how gladiatorial, barbaric this game we play and love is as players. You lose sight of it, and you forget that at the drop of a hat, that could happen to any one of us, right?
Yeah.
And irrespective of, it cuts right to the heart when it's one of your guys, but the brotherhood hits you just as hard. Like I remember at Rutgers in 2011, sitting down at the bottom of the Rutgers tunnel as Eric Legrand led Rutgers onto the field. I had tears in my eyes. It's just, it doesn't matter who it is. It's a fellow football player.
Yeah.
And it's part of that fraternity. You're just like, wow. And it was one of those moments in West you just hate to see him. Whether it's yours, somebody else's, you just, fortunately, it ended in a pretty favorable way. Obviously something to be monitored. I'm not in the breaking news business. That's not my job, nor do I want it to be. So I'll let this play out, let the West Virginia medical staff report as they see fit, using whatever timeline they see fit. But we're in a much better place with it than we thought we were there for a few minutes Saturday night.
Yeah, and that is good news, certainly. I'm with you guys. Eric Legrand stands out. I mean, with my job, a few times a year, I'll see Ryan Shazier walk down the hallway or walk across the field, and that always, it strikes me.
He crossed my mind Saturday, Wes. He did.
Every single time, Ryan Shazier. I mean, there was a lot of people who didn't think that dude was going to walk ever again, and be able to play with his kids, and he was able to dance at his own wedding. He's able to, alumni weekend, get introduced and walk out of the tunnel and all that stuff, and hopefully, all indicators so far so good for CJ, and let's continue to hope that is the case. We got to get to our first break here. We are way overdue, but when we come back on the other side, we'll look at some game recaps, some of the predictions and projections that we made, see what we got right, see what we got wrong. Wesley Uhler, Jed Drenning, Owen Schmitt, it's in the gun, and we'll be back after this message from our friends at Toothman Ford.
I'm talking with J.R. Toothman of Toothman Ford. J.R., everybody knows a lot of pro athletes buy from you. What's the secret?
Just like Will Greer, future Hall of Famer Frank Gore, James Washington, and many more pros, these guys have financial advisors that are always looking out for them to save time and money, and that's why they always shop at Toothman Ford.
And what if you're like us regular folks that don't have people giving us advice?
You don't need a financial advisor. Toothman Ford will save you time and money no matter who you are. Plus, we'll buy your car even if you don't buy from us. Visit toothmanford.com and get a quick, instant cash offer.
That sounds like a score to me.
That's right. And as always, we'll take anything in trade from chicken wings to Super Bowl rings.
Toothman Ford's got a lot of fans. Here's another one, Dallas Cowboys QB Will Greer.
This is Will Greer, former West Virginia and current NFL quarterback. And cars really do cost less in Grafton at Toothman Ford.
That's a fact, Will. Thanks. You can shop online anytime at toothmanford.com.
Back in the gun here. ITG episode number 15. Time to take a look at some of the projections and predictions that we made for the week that was in college football. We'll start with the top 25, from this past Saturday. Jed, it was a full slate of top 25 action. We'll pull up the graphic now. How did we do?
Yeah, top 25, what you're looking at on screen, if you're watching on screen. If not, we'll walk you through it. On the left was our projection we made last week based on point spreads and over-unders and whatnot. On the right is the actual score, how the game played out. We projected an Ole Miss win over Kentucky at home, 31-24. Ole Miss did win, 22-19. We projected an Alabama win at Arkansas, 38-21. Alabama did win, 49-26. We projected a Florida State win at home in a shootout over Wake, 37-31. Not so fast. Actual result, Wake actually won the football game 31-21. And then finally, we were pretty close with this one with our projection based on the numbers. We projected a Clemson win at home 27-20 over the Fighting Gibbies of North Carolina State. The actual score wasn't 27-20, it was 30-20. So close on that one. But that's how our projections and actual results unfolded in the top 25.
And then we'll take a look, obviously, at the Big 12 Conference as well, too. It was a big weekend across the conference. Some prove-it games, some revenge games, some separation games. How did we do locally across the Big 12, Mr. Jedger?
Oh, yeah. Let's start with the obvious one, okay? We projected Oklahoma to go on the road, silly us, and win in Fort Worth 35-31 over TCU. They were favored by 5. So we looked at a 35-31-ish score. Obviously, that is not what happened. TCU blew the doors off Oklahoma, 55-24. So do the math. Oklahoma 5-point favorite. Oklahoma lost by 31. So 36-point differential, neat trick. Oklahoma State, we projected Baylor to win a close one, 28-27 in Waco. Actually, the Cowboys came out on top, 36-25, big win for the Cowboys to stay unbeaten. Texas Tech K-State, we projected a 9-point K-State win, 33-24. It actually was a 9-point K-State win, but it was 37-28. And then finally, we projected Iowa State to knock off Kansas and Lawrence, 31-27, based on the spread, based on the over-under, 31-27 type score. This one was a rock fight. Kansas held on to win an ugly football game, 14-11, to stay unbeaten. And as we know, for the first time ever, ESPN Game Day is going to Lawrence for the big showdown between the unbeaten Jayhawks and the unbeaten TCU Horned Frogs on Saturday.
ESPN going for Game Day for football.
Yes.
For the first time. They've been there a few times for hoops.
I didn't know that. Yeah,
football, yeah.
It's easy to forget there is a game day for hoops. Come on. It's,
it's not
that
same,
event oriented, all right? Yeah. Not the same thing. For football. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. That'll be a fun one, Kansas TCU this weekend, and obviously we'll have the Saturday off. I'm sure there'll be plenty of Mountaineers watching that one. I was hopeful that Baylor was going to take care of business against Oklahoma State, just that they would, they'd been a top 15 team rolling into Morgantown. Instead now they're just on the outside looking in.
Coaches are still ranked.
Yeah, coaches, they're still ranked. Oklahoma State now, obviously, 7th, I believe they were.
They're climbing.
They're climbing, certainly. So, yeah, big weekend across the Big 12 last weekend, and that's how it all shook out for us. Now, how'd we do individually? Somebody got on the board this weekend.
Somebody got on the board. It wasn't me.
We each make our predictions. Jed gives us the Big 12 signal caller of the week, where he predicts which quarterback will throw for the most yards in the conference. Jed, we'll pull up the graphic. How'd you do?
I went with Hunter Deckers. I thought we'd have a shootout in Lawrence, Kansas, and I thought he would be a beneficiary of that. Wasn't so much of a shootout. We talked about the 14-11 defensive struggle. He ended up with 287 yards, which was good for 5th among Big 12 passers. Another big day for Donovan Smith, who led the way with 359 for Texas Tech in the loss at K-State. Now remember, we might not be facing Donovan Smith by the time we get to Lubbock. Their starter might be back, but Blake Shapen also in a loss against Oklahoma State, 345 for Baylor. Hudson Card, we saw what he did to West Virginia. Big day for him, went over 3 bills. Max Duggan did it through the air and on the ground. Big day for Max Duggan and TCU against the Sooners. But I didn't hit it. I was 5th place.
Owen, I think you had some success, partner. Our Big 12 beer truck of the week, which running back in the conference will run for the most yards. Owen, go ahead. Gloat. We'll pull up the graphic now. How'd you do?
It was a landslide, honestly. Deuce Vaughn, baby, my man. Coming up big.
I mean, you're right. It wasn't close. I mean, by 34 yards, he ran away with it.
I mean, unless your name's Adrian Martinez, who had more rushing yards than him. But
he did.
Running backs.
Running backs, Jed.
I made the rule. I know. Okay. I help you out. I'm looking out for my brother, all right?
Big day.
Trucker's cap, okay?
Big day. Big day. Big day.
I see what Owen does. He takes a week off. And that's why he was a no-show last week, finishing 12th, okay? And saved it all for his effort this week, and it paid off.
Hey, Jed, I had a coach one time when I was growing up playing hockey who told me I lost the scoring title for our league in hockey on the last day of the season because the guy who was in second place behind me scored 2 goals, and the second one was an empty netter. So I was 1 ahead. He scored twice to tie me and then scored an empty netter at the end of the game to win the scoring title for our league. And I'm steaming in the locker room, right? I'm like, you got to be effing kidding me. This guy, an empty net goal gives him the scoring title. Come on. And my coach, his name was Fred Jacobs, still remember, put his arm around my shoulder. I was 13, 14 years old. He goes, Wes, in sports, they don't ask how. They ask how many. And he got one more than you. Owen,
my favorite weird
in this contest, we don't ask how. We ask how many. And you and I got one, and Jed got none.
Here's my favorite weird stat story. West Virginia, a couple years ago, became the first Big 12 team since 1999 to lead the nation in passing defense, okay? Here's how we did it. We edged out Army, who was right behind us.
That's right. In the bowl game.
The game-winning drive in the Liberty Bowl, the passing yards that Austin Kimball assembled knocked Army's defense behind ours to both win us the game and win us the national passing defense title. That's the neatest one I've seen.
Double whammy from Austin.
The double whammy for Army. They lost the game, and they lost the number 1 pass defense ranking.
Well, Jed, if it makes you feel any better, I had a poor showing this week. Your Big 12 defense of the week, where I tell you which defense is going to give up the most amount of points. I took Kansas State. They didn't even finish in the top 5. They gave up 28 to Texas Tech. It was those Kansas Jayhawks stingy, allowing just 11 points to Iowa State.
Which was surprising. I mean, that might have been the last team I would have picked.
You say.
And I'll say this, that's the first time, Wes, you haven't placed in the top 5.
Well, I mean.
You've been consistent.
You know,
yeah.
I tell you, I'm pretty synonymous with defense. I mean, you know, but.
You are. You certainly are.
You think defense, I mean, you think Grant Wiley and then Wes Uhler. I think it's that order. One
kind of look the same these days. Have you seen Grant recently? You kind of look the same these days.
Dude, Reed Williams, too. My goodness, Reed Williams. He probably weighs about as much as I do now as well. We going to do predictions for this Saturday, correct here?
We are, because of our strange schedule layout, yes.
Jed, redemption is spelled Jed. Who you
We'll
got
see
this week?
Uh,
We'll see.
Again, West Virginia not playing Saturday. We're going to go ahead and make our picks, our individual picks, and we'll review them next week. I'm going to pick for my signal caller of the week to throw for the most yards as a player in the Big 12. Boy, I'm going with Spencer Sanders at home in Stillwater. Even in the big one at Baylor, he was held under 2 bills. I think he's due for another big outing at home in Stillwater against Texas Tech. Count me in for Spencer Sanders for Oklahoma State to throw for the most yards in the Big 12.
Big O, are you riding with your boy Deuce Vaughn?
I'm going with Burn Orange this week.
I think that's the right call.
Bijan Robinson. Yep, yeah, the horse from Texas.
I got a feeling he might stomp a mud hole in the Sooners' chest. And whew, I never root for Texas, but for them to be the ones that would give Oklahoma their 3rd straight loss and send that fan base into just an absolute meltdown, yeah, wouldn't hate that. Wouldn't hate that one bit. You know, Oklahoma fans, they've gotten by too long in life just not being as insufferable as Texas fans, but I think it's about time this humbling continues.
You might have one guy to worry about. Roschon Johnson. He might give you a running for Texas.
He might, dude.
You know, I mean, Oklahoma. Who knows? In this topsy-turvy Big 12, watch Oklahoma show up and blow the off Texas. That's whatever you least expect is what you're probably going to get. But
I'm going to go Iowa State for my Big 12 defense of the week. Kansas State's flying high, but I'm still not sure, that they're going to score more than 20 consistently. And we all know what happens in night games when ranked teams go to Ames for a night game. That's where hopes and dreams go to die. So I will take the Cyclones, fresh off solid performance, just allowing 14 against Kansas. Let's see if they can keep it to under 20 against Kansas State at home this weekend on Saturday. We're going to get to our last break. When we come back here, more Texas recap, the good, the bad, the pivotal moments. It's all ahead here on ITG.
Game day got you on the go? We get it. GoMart is here to keep you going all season long with stores throughout our home state. We're a proud West Virginia-owned company, and our friendly staff is committed to serving our communities. From fuel to freshly brewed coffee and snacks, a stop at GoMart to cover your game day needs is always a touchdown. Plus, GoMart Rewards members earn points with each purchase to redeem for discounts on gas and free items. So stop by, start saving, and stay on the go with GoMart.
Final segment here in The Gun, our Texas recap episode. It's time to get into the good and the bad. Mr. Drenning, you were the 3rd of this podcast here that was down in Austin on Saturday night, so I'll let you start here. You want to go with the good? You want to go with the bad? Where you want to begin?
There's plenty of bad, so let's knock it out. Again, you guys feel free to pitch in. I'm going to start with in no particular order, the drops. Okay. That was an issue that plagued us, especially early at critical times. And there was plenty of blame to go around, whether it was the tight end room, the receiver room. We can jump back over and say defensively, lack of a pass rush outside of that first series. We made a nice play to pin them back in there with the sack. Kind of evaporated after that. And I think part of that was a byproduct of them, once again, similar to some extent to what Kansas did, putting us on our heels with their RPO game. It was a very effective RPO game. So it wasn't a lot of true pocket type stuff. So they had our eyes very busy with what they were doing with movement, with shifting. But then post-snap, Sark's RPO game's pretty nasty. Coverage, I think it's tied to the same thing. Our eyes were really busy on the back end. We weren't getting pressure on the passer. So coverage, pass rush, I'd even include tackling. I even took a note here. If you look at the missed tackles that we had against Texas and chart it throughout the course of the season, what we've had, we had a dozen against Texas. Missed tackles by game, and this is per Pro Football Focus, which isn't spot on, but it's a fair barometer. We had 8 against Pitt. We had 9 against Kansas, 7 against Towson. We were really starting to shore things up, bottling up a Virginia Tech offense that struggled in some ways. We only missed 4 tackles against Virginia Tech, but we had a dozen against Texas. And again, I think they had us kind of out of sorts defensively. And then I'd say the explosive play differential. They made a lot of huge plays. We didn't answer with huge plays of our own. We had a couple that were either big plays or fringe big plays, but we really couldn't build off of those. So the differential in those things was another thing that really hit us hard. But that's some of the bad stuff. Before we get into the good stuff, I'll let you guys pitch in with what you saw that didn't work out so well either.
Yeah, I'd say some of the stuff that I was a little perturbed about was some of the penalties and when they came in the game. Obviously, that interference call, just don't understand where you're coming there, and giving up that face mask down when we got them pinned and giving them a fresh set of downs. That was tough for me to kind of swallow. It was just like, golly, that's when you really need to be dialed in. You know what I mean? You can't make mistakes down there because you're putting yourself in good field position if you can get out of that situation with a 3-and-out. Like you said, the tackling, I thought we did do a decent job at hemming up Bijan Robinson. For the most part, I know he did get 100 yards, but they were he worked for all those yards.
Yeah.
He wasn't busting it. I think he maybe broke one 15-yarder on us, which, that's not really nothing of note. But like you said, kind of that's just where I was. The secondary was a little over aggressive. I know we got beat on that double move, that post corner of like on the first touchdown. I was kind of thinking to myself, like, good Lord, man, like we shouldn't have been that far behind on that play. So there's learning curves, man. I'm sure there's a speed difference on the field. I mean, that number 4 for Texas looked really fast. I mean, he looked fast on TV. So I'm sure on the field he was just lightning speed. But it just seemed like we were kind of out of position at times in the secondary where, if we're just one step here, one step there, we're ending up making those plays and putting ourselves in better positions to create turnovers.
I echo everything you guys said. I'll add one more here. One thing to me that it just feels like it's happened to us, once a year that we have one of these games. Last year it was Baylor, right down there in Waco. The year before, I'm trying to think, Oklahoma.
I'd say Tech at home.
I think it was, or maybe
or down in Lubbock. Yeah,
these games where early on the other team is feeling it, nothing's going right for us, and we just, for whatever reason, can't put our foot down, can't draw a line in the sand, can't do something to flip that to get back in the game. Like all throughout the first quarter and the second quarter there, we're falling behind. Texas is having their way. And I'm like, just someone needs to make a play. Yeah. Someone on offense needs to break a tackle or two and turn a 15-yarder into a 50-yarder. Someone on defense needs to make a play and create a turnover or a big TFL to get us the ball back right away. It's like sometimes, and not all the time, but it's like we've had one of these games over the last 2-3 years where it's almost like a snowball rolling downhill where just early on the other team grabs the momentum, and for whatever reason we can't do anything to stop that, to get it back. And it's like you're looking up in the second quarter like, man, is this game over already?
Yeah.
You almost feel, Wes, like you're trying to stop a hurricane with a trash bag at some point early on. I know what you're saying.
Be like me trying to pick up Big O on a block. I mean, it just it's ugly. It's ugly. And that's concerning to me because, listen, every team in every sport, you have those games occasionally. You just do. Hell, the Oklahoma Sooners just had one last week against TCU. But for us, it seems like we're good for one of those every year where just nothing's going right from the get-go, and we can't do anything to kind of just grab the game by the neck and say, you know what, we're going to find a way to hang in this fight. We might still lose. The final score might be a little lopsided, but we're not going to let the result become a foregone conclusion this early. That to me is, something now that's happened a few years in a row and shouldn't be.
That's a fair point. And we talked about this last week. One of our concerns coming out of the Virginia Tech game was a slow start, right? Well, we played 4 Power 5 opponents, 3 in prime time on the road under the lights. In 3 of those 4 games, we've had a slow start. Now, Pitt, you could argue we were kind of feeling each other out, right? Fair enough. Kansas got off to a solid start, just didn't finish strong. Virginia Tech, slow start. Texas, very slow start. We're void out of the gates, right? So you got to ask yourself, okay, down the stretch, when you're trying to look through the remaining schedule and pick out what remaining opportunities you have to win, well, it's not going to happen unless you do this. You string together a 60-minute performance in which you start like you did against Kansas and you finish like you did against Virginia Tech. That's what it's going to take against the remaining teams on the schedule to give yourself a puncher's chance to win those football games. A fast start like we had against Kansas and a strong finish like we did against Tech. You're not going to be able to do it with 30 good minutes of football. No matter which front end, back end, doesn't matter. We got to string that together for these remaining games, starting with Baylor.
Yeah, I agree completely, Jed. I mean, unfortunately, wow. And Wes, like you said, they had a giant vacuum, man, and they sucked that Big Mo right out of the sky. It
sure did.
And then, you get a guy who's supposed to be who's kind of been that giant for you, go down like that. I mean, it's tough, man. Games like that are tough, but like you said, somebody has got to step it up and make a play on this team. And everybody should be thinking they can be that guy, because that's all it takes. One big explosive play, stack another one, obviously, and then
get that snowball moving in the other way.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. But it just takes stringing those plays together, man. And it's funny as a fan how you can watch it happen. You can feel it. You can legit feel it. It's just like, man, this is not going our way. We're playing dice here, and we're rolling snake eyes every time. So
I mean, you get the sense that when it's one of those nights and nobody will stop it from being. I mean, when Aubrey goes up for the pick and it's deflected and it falls into the hands of Xavier Worthy, and we have the opportunity for the onside kick and it goes right through KP's hands, it was just like, okay, can somebody secure the football and make this go our way? And I'll say this too, in terms of the coverage issues we had, the margin for error when Texas comes to play is always going to be very finite. Their talent is absolutely as advertised. So the only thing you wondered, what version of Texas are we going to get? The version that showed up against Alabama or the version that showed up in the fourth quarter at Lubbock? Well, the version we got was the version that showed up against Alabama. Okay. Xavier Worthy, he's one of the fastest football players I've ever seen in person on the field. He really is. I saw him in Morgantown a year ago. He looked faster the other night than he did in Morgantown. And he had 7 catches, 80-some odd yards in Morgantown, of course, a year ago. But he was absolutely, in person at field level, as explosive a football player as I've ever seen
some
up close in person.
Some Tavon vibes
and I've seen some fast cats, okay? He's right there among the fastest guys I've ever seen at field level. You want to go some of the good?
I do want to go some of the good. Let's get out of here on a positive note.
Let's go with this. I got to start with JT's toughness. And I think the signature moment as far as JT's toughness goes, okay, there was the point where he got hit by the 340-pounder in his face. I think it was Coburn, when they had the roughing the passer call against him. And he was down. And initially, it almost looked like he was down for the count. He went down hard. And, I mean, Tony's reaction on the broadcast, it looked pretty serious for the first couple seconds. JT somehow made his way to his feet and completely waved off the training staff. Waved him off. Said, nope, we're in the middle of a fight here. We're on the business end of some bad stuff. The last thing I'm going to do is leave my guys on the field. Get back over there. Hey, training staff, get back over there. And he just waved him off, limped his way back, didn't miss a snap. So for a guy that has had some tough luck from an injury standpoint, let's knock on wood, we know what happened to him at USC. I think it was really tough luck with that lat injury that he suffered and just was a nagging injury for him at Georgia. He's a tough kid. He is a tough kid. Let nobody question JT's toughness. I think that showed through. He was under duress, played under duress for the balance of the game the other night. That was the biggest shot that I saw him take out of several shots, but he stood right in and delivered. And then the other thing I'd go to is at least we regrouped and had somewhat of a better second half. Neil challenged the kids at halftime. He told him, he's like, look, you can't unfilm what you did in the first half. I've told you that before. What you put on film is there for all of time. Scouts are going to see it. Your teammates are going to see it. Your grandkids are going to see it. Fans are going to see it. It's going to be there until the end of time. So make what you put on film for the final 30 minutes a lot better than what you put on for the first 30 minutes. And I think to some extent they did that. In particular, I was pleased or impressed with how they responded after seeing what happened to their fallen brother in CJ. I think you could argue some of our best football came when the kids regrouped, wiped the tears from their eyes, and they were playing hard. Probably the better part of the night, but they were certainly playing hard down the stretch in the second half. So that's one of the other things I'd look to. And by and large, there are a couple individual performances. It was nice to get Aubrey Burks back. People are going to talk about the interception that slipped through his hands, but he did some relatively nice things. He was a bright spot, I think, in a sea of struggles, maybe defensively, especially on that back end. From a tackling standpoint, maybe to some extent from a coverage standpoint, but it was nice to have him, getting back to normal a bit. Okay. So he's one guy I would point out, but that's about it.
Yeah, I thought just going off somebody who kind of stepped up, Justin Johnson, I thought he did a decent job running the football there. Towards the end, he had a couple of good plays where he just kind of, stuck to it and ran hard. I mean, he's pretty quick guy. He got the edge a couple of times there. Nothing spectacular, but it was nice to see somebody come in there and get the job done. He looks to be understanding a little bit better than, in my opinion, Mathis in the run game. It just seems like he's just dancing a lot back there. I don't know if he's just kind of waiting on to hit the holes, but in my opinion, 26 did a great job there, kind of filling in those shoes at the end in the second half.
Yeah.
That's really all I got, honestly. I mean, I thought, JT did good. I thought he was kind of shaky on times. He's not as great of a passer when he's on the run, that I noticed a few times in the game, just on some throws that he did have. But I mean, man, he'll hang in there, dude, and he'll step up. He's a tough dude, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and credit Mike Joseph and company and all the work that they do to
keep them boys strong,
get those boys ready to go. And I can't remember who it was with. I actually heard an interview this past week though. JT, it might have been with our buddy Andrew Caridi. I'm not sure, but JT was talking about how he's so confident in his body and where he's at health-wise because of Mike and the work that they do. So let's hope that continues here as we approach the midway point of the season here in just a couple weeks. Gentlemen, as we start to wrap this up, pivotal moments. I'm going to go first on this one. How about that? All right. The host is going to put his foot down. Because I don't know if we might all have the same one, or I don't know here, but I'm going to go first as Jed gives us an up close look at his neck here on the Zoom camera. I mean, it's hard to pick a pivotal moment from a game that you lost like that, but there's one that stands out to me. WVU's second possession of the game on offense. All right, so Mountaineers. Jed's just holding up a piece of paper that says drops on it.
I know where you're going with this.
And for some reason now Jed's way out of focus.
I'm way out of focus.
That piece of paper messed up your camera there. It looks
the
like
white balance off balance.
The white balance is off there. WVU gets the ball first. You don't score any points, but you gain some yards. You flip the field a little bit right before you punt it back. Defense comes out, forces a 3-and-out to start for Texas. You get the ball at the Texas 48. You're 48 yards away from the end zone. You're a first down or so away from being in Casey leg range, at least for a field goal. Third down, 3rd and 2. Mike O'Laughlin, TJ, that play there. We hope Mike's okay. You hate to see him, the injury there to that same knee that's plagued him. But you got to have a first down there. Either it's not the best throw by JT. He did Mike no favors, but that's a ball that still either needs to be caught or JT needs to pull that down and take the green grass in front of him and just run for 3 or 4 yards and slide and keep the drive alive. Fine, you decide to go for it on 4th down, 4th and 2. I think all of us were sitting on the edge of our seats, right? Here we go, a little more aggressive from Neil Brown on the offense. Again, not a perfect ball from JT. He probably wants both of those throws back, but enough that it should have still been caught by Bryce Ford Wheaton. So You're set up at the 48 with great field position. Not only do you do nothing with it, you give the ball back to Texas now in great field position. They drive right down the field and score. And, I mean, the riot was on in a way there. That, to me, that sequence of 3rd and 2 where JT could have ran it, not the best throw to Mike, but he should have probably still caught it. And then on 4th down, not the greatest throw to Bryce, but he should have still caught it too. You not only surrender the momentum in that moment, you give Texas the ball again right near midfield when you had all the field position working in your favor. They score quickly, and they go on to score often and pretty easily. That, to me, was my pivotal moment. I have a group text of my WVU buddies from college and everything, and, I'm reacting in the group chat of, I can't believe we just blew that opportunity. We got the ball at the 48-yard line. We did nothing with it. That's a big moment here early on, and I probably was overreacting a little bit. All my buddies were, hey, listen, it's the first quarter, all right? Calm down here. There's a lot of football to be played. But when you're on the road, when you're a double-digit underdog, when you're playing a team like Jed has mentioned that has the talent in Texas in a nighttime environment against a team that's really honked off at the game that they just lost to down in Lubbock the previous week, you got to capitalize in those moments. You at least have to come away with 3 there, or you at least have to continue the field position advantage, and maybe you pin them inside their 10 if you end up punting. What you can't do is give them the ball right back at close to midfield and let them go right down the field and score. That was my pivotal moment.
Love the passion, brother.
Oh, we got to drink some. We got to drink some beers together, man.
No, I mean, it's in a game like this, it seems like it was just a giant snowball. To me, just the bonehead penalties was what was the biggest thing for me in the pivotal moments. It just seemed like, Koba with the 15-yard personal out of bounds. I mean, just things that don't help yourself. You're just hurting yourself every time. It's like we're trying to make a big play so much that we end up not making one. But I'll say the trick play that just kind of like gashed me right there. I'm like, oh man, we're playing so aggressive right now. Yeah. We have no control over what we're doing. And in the secondary, I mean, clearly it was obvious. There was a lot of miscommunication at times, or we were just plain old out of alignments, out of place. It just seemed like we struggled really bad in the secondary. But that play for me kind of was like, oh man, when you're dialing up trick plays, the second score, and we're just biting on it hard. So I don't know. For me, that was just, and the evolution of what conspired after that.
Jedgar?
I go back to what you talked about, Wes, that sequence where we had back-to-back opportunities. And I'm sitting here watching the cut up of the 3rd and 2. That was the dropped ball. JT could have run for that first down.
Easily.
Yeah, he could have.
And
green grass and high tides forever.
Yeah, and he's the type of quarterback who typically keeps his receivers or pass catchers, in this case Mike, out of harm's way. And yeah, they cut Big Mike O down like a Christmas fir.
Oh, dude, you can see him standing there,
yeah.
like looking at him like, holy shit, holy Schmitt, I just did that. But legit, I mean, you could tell the remorse on him.
Yeah.
Instantly when he threw it, he knew he shouldn't have thrown that. Put him in a bad situation, big time.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm watching it right here on the cut up, and as I noticed the first time I went through it yesterday, it's something that he could have kept it and not put us in a bad spot, because 3rd and 2 fails, begets 4th and 2. We talked about it. Yeah, JT didn't make a perfect throw for the time capsule, but it was certainly catchable. Bryce ran a good enough route to beat the corner on the slant. It's a football that he's often going to catch, but that time we didn't. And, it's under the circumstances, it's a big gamble. It's 4th and 2 at your 40. You're gambling that your offense is going to keep the momentum flowing your way instead of turning it Texas's way. And when your coach is aggressive, you got to reward him for being aggressive. We didn't do that. Obviously, Neil signaled to Graham, hey, you like a call? I'm rolling with it. Yep, I like a call. Let's roll with it. That's what kept us from punting, and I think Oliver Straw had a chance to pin him. But instead, we went aggressive. We went for it. It didn't work. You got to deliver. We had 2 chances, really 3 chances, I'd argue. 1, starting if JT keeps it, we move the sticks. 2, if Big Mike holds on to it, man, that's tough, though. Like I said, he got cut down like a Christmas tree. But if he holds on to it, that's a first down. If Bryce holds on to it, that's a first down. So he had 3 opportunities in 2 plays to move the sticks. We didn't deliver. We didn't reward the aggression on the part of the call. And like you guys said, we punted away, and next thing you know, a 6-play drive by Texas, boom, they're up 7-0 and never look back. It's a lead they would never relinquish. So it's difficult to look at something other than that. Is you never know. I mean, all we know is we would have been playing this game. Football is a game of cause and effect. So it's not as if we convert that first down. Everything else happens exactly the same, and it's 28-7 instead of 28-9. No, every play affects the next play.
Maybe 21-7 instead.
We're now playing this game in a completely alternate universe.
Yeah.
In which West Virginia might go up 7-0. We don't know what Texas does from a play call situation. We don't know.
Jed, maybe you go up 7-0 and Texas muffs the ensuing kickoff.
You never know.
Yeah.
I mean, all you know is you don't continue down this linear path where everything else is exactly the same except we score on that drive. You're playing a much different football game. Maybe it's a football game where Texas would have still come to play and jumped out to a giant lead and still hammered us, but it would have happened to happen in a different universe than this game did.
Hey, what was that 4th and 1 at Pitt?
What do you mean?
Where were we on the field?
47.
Just across the 50, right?
Yeah, 47. So right around there. Yeah.
Similar situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
You wonder if some of that got to him a little bit. Like, hey, man, just play your game. You know what I mean? But it didn't. I don't know. You know what I mean? You love to see that. You love to see the aggression. But you got a guy who can punt the crap out of the ball, put yourself in good field position. I understand you want to start fast. Like we said, it's a multiverse, man. Everything's a reaction. So
I mean, everything's cause and effect. That's why I sometimes get frustrated. We have to get out of here, but talking big picture, sometimes I get frustrated because you'll see people say, man, we had the ball done inside their 10-yard line 3 times. We should have 21 points. I'm like, no. The field position never changed. Okay. Yeah. You didn't score the first time. You forced the punt. You got it back on a short field. You didn't score again. You forced the punt. You got it back on a short field. It's not 21 points. It's 7 points and then reset with a kickoff. That's not 21 points.
Right.
Everything affects and impacts everything else. Football is cause and effect. Okay. And once one thing goes differently than it actually did, that changes everything that follows it. From play selection to performance to field position, nothing's ever the same twice. It's just like lightning striking, but it didn't work out. But again, tip your hat to the aggressiveness, but it wasn't rewarded. So
not just tip your hat, tip your cowboy hat down there in Austin, Texas. Those are our pivotal moments brought to you by our friends at High Street Prints. Make sure you're checking them out, highstreetprintshop.com, for all of your printing and merchandise needs.
Surprise is coming, fellas.
We'll have some merch real soon on itgfootball.com.
Next time we're on the air, we might be wearing some.
Ooh.
In fact, I'm going to say we will.
I love it.
I'm going to say we will.
Well, next time we're going to be on the air, it's going to be a few days, bye week this week, so we're only going to have one episode for you this week. No huddle, no preview episode, obviously. That's why we hopefully we gave the people what they wanted here. Yeah. And what the people wanted was Owen to get one of his beer trucks correct, and checkmate in that regard there, partner. Obviously, we'll have the bye week, so our next episode will be early next week. We'll have the preview of the Baylor Bears on Thursday night for you. Thanks one more time to our new friends at Bet Online. This episode brought to you by Bet Online. Make sure you're visiting betonline.ag for all your gambling needs as well, too. I might have to, I don't know, get some action this weekend without the Mountaineers. Make things interesting. That's what you do there.
I steer clear. Do as you will. I just like to look.
I don't steer unless I'm down in Texas, Mr. Jedger, all right? Bet Online for all your gambling needs. Gentlemen, pleasure as always. Make sure everyone following us on social media, In the Gun Podcast, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, on YouTube as well, too, if you want to see the video element of all this with the graphics and Owen's beautiful beard and Jed and I's beautiful mugs. And the one thing we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. We've got some big things. Got some big things planned for the rest of the season. We're already brainstorming off-season ideas, and we got some cool guests lined up as well too. So make sure you're joining us along the way for all the shenanigans. For the beer truck, Owen Schmitt, and the signal caller, Jed Drenning, I am Wesley Uhler saying thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next week. You've been In the Gun.